The Blues Brothers came out in 1980, and it has never really left. The car chases, the music, the cameos, the sheer chaos of it all. Most people have seen it more times than they can count. But even if you know every scene by heart, there's a good chance you've been missing things hiding right there on the screen. Here are 25 small details you missed in The Blues Brothers. Detail 25. The script was 324 pages long. Before a single camera rolled, Dan Aykroyd sat down and wrote one of the most unusual screenplays in Hollywood history. The average screenplay runs between 90 and 120 pages. Aykroyd's first draft came in at approximately 324 pages, nearly 3 times the standard length, typed single-spaced on yellow paper with no standard formatting. When he handed it to Universal Pictures, it was so thick that it was bound inside the cover of a Los Angeles Yellow Pages directory. Studio executives passed it around as a joke, convinced it was unfilmable. Director John Landis took it and worked with Aykroyd to cut it down into something that could actually be shot. Even after all the cutting, what ended up on screen still felt like it was bursting at the seams. The original document contained detailed backstory and character histories that never made it to theaters, including an extended explanation of why Elwood randomly has a tube of powerful glue in one scene, which appears in the theatrical cut without context and only makes sense if you've seen the director's version. Detail 24. Steven Spielberg is standing right there. One of the most famous cameos in the film almost goes unnoticed because it happens in the middle of a frantic scene. When Jake and Elwood finally burst into the Cook County Assessor's office at the end of the film to pay the orphanage's tax bill, the clerk stamping their paperwork at the counter is Steven Spielberg. He plays the Cook County Assessor's clerk with complete deadpan composure while a riot erupts around him. Spielberg was a friend of director John Landis, and at the time of filming was arguably the most commercially successful director in Hollywood. Jaws had come out in 1975, Close Encounters in 1977, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was already in production. His willingness to play a no-dialogue functionary in a comedy spoke to the relaxed mutual respect between filmmakers in that particular moment. If you blink or look at the wrong part of the frame during the scene, you miss him entirely. Detail 23. Frank Oz opens the film. The very first speaking role in The Blues Brothers, the prison corrections officer who returns Jake's personal belongings to him at Joliet State Prison at the start of the film, is Frank Oz. At the time, he was best known as the voice and performer behind Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and Animal on the Muppets, and would also shortly become known to a new generation as the voice of Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, which had come out the previous year in 1979. His appearance in the film is completely straight-faced. No comedy, no winking at the camera, just a prison officer doing his job. He's gone from the screen in under 2 minutes. Most viewers spend those 2 minutes registering that the movie has started and not thinking carefully about who is handing Jake his wallet. Once you know it's him, the opening scene plays completely differently.
Anything else?
Yes, do you have a Miss Piggy?
Detail 22. The Muppet connection hidden in the toy store. Shortly before the Bluesmobile crashes through a Toys R Us during the mall chase, a man standing near the counter asks a cashier if they have a Miss Piggy doll, while holding up a stuffed Grover toy. The man asking the question was placed there deliberately as a nod to Frank Oz, who provides the voices for both Miss Piggy and Grover. If you look quickly at the shelves in the same shot, You can also spot an animal toy sitting near the counter and a Cookie Monster visible on a shelf in the background. Both Muppet characters also performed by Oz. It's a layered little joke that happens in the span of about 2 seconds, right before a car plows through the building.
Chicken wire?
What do you say we set for a sound check?
Detail 21. John Landis hid himself and his signature all over the film. Director John Landis put himself in the film as the state trooper driving the second police car, the one that shows up after the first car calls for backup during the mall chase. He's in uniform on screen for a matter of seconds, identifiable only if you already know to look for him. But his presence in the film goes beyond a physical cameo. Landis had a long-running personal in-joke of hiding the phrase, "See you next Wednesday," somewhere in each of his movies. It was the title of a film that existed only in his imagination, a ghost project he kept alive by planting its name in his actual work. In The Blues Brothers, the phrase appears on a movie poster briefly visible in the background during one of the chase sequences. It's gone from the frame in under 2 seconds. Between casting himself as a cop and hiding his recurring signature on a background wall, Landis left 2 separate personal fingerprints on the film, and most viewers have never noticed either one.
Bread for my brother?
We have a Dom Perignon 71 at $120.
That'll be fine, pal.
Detail 20. Paul Reubens was a waiter before Pee Wee Herman. The waiter who takes the wine order when Jake and Elwood go to the upscale Chez Paul restaurant to convince Mr. Fabulous to rejoin the band is Paul Reubens, several years before he became internationally famous as Pee Wee Herman. Reubens had been doing comedy and theater work in Los Angeles when he landed the small part. He has maybe 30 seconds of screen time, but once you know it's him, you can't unsee it.
It's 95. Thank you, Elwood.
Okay.
Detail 19. Twiggy is at the gas station when Elwood is waiting for the gas truck to arrive and starts chatting up a woman in a Jaguar convertible, asking if she wants him to wash the dead bugs off her windshield. That woman is Twiggy, the British model who had been one of the most famous faces in the world during the late 1960s. By 1980, she had transitioned into acting and recording, and her blink and you'll miss it appearance here is one of the film's more surprising hidden cameos. Detail 18. Joe Walsh is the first prisoner on the table. At the very end of the film, when the Blues Brothers finally perform their concert inside the prison and the inmates begin to go wild, the first convict who jumps up onto a table, positioned right at the front of the crowd, is Joe Walsh of the Eagles. Walsh was a close friend of the production and slipped into the scene in full convict costume. He's on screen for just a moment, but he's unmistakably there if you're looking for him. Detail 17. Chaka Khan is in the church choir. During the Triple Rock Baptist Church sequence, where Jake receives his divine inspiration, the choir performing behind the Reverend Cleophas James is filled with real singers. One of them is Chaka Khan, who had scored major hits in the 1970s with Rufus and as a solo artist. She's in the choir, singing with everyone else, with no special introduction or acknowledgement in the scene. The same sequence also features one of the film's most physically extraordinary moments: John Belushi performing a full backflip on the church steps, a move he had trained for specifically and pulled off for real in front of the camera. If you knew it was coming, you'd still barely believe you were watching a stunt-free take. If Chaka Khan distracted your attention, you might have missed it entirely. Detail 16. John Belushi's wife has a cameo. Judy Jacklin, John Belushi's wife, appears briefly as a waitress in the scene where Jake and Elwood visit the Holiday Inn lounge to convince Murph and the Magic Tones to rejoin the band. It's a small moment in a busy scene, and her name doesn't appear in the main credits. But it was a personal touch that Belushi clearly wanted in the film.
They broke my watch.
I'm gonna catch that sucker.
Detail 15. Stephen Bishop was also in Animal House. The Illinois state trooper who pursues the brothers during the initial mall chase, the one who says, "I think I broke my watch," after his police car is completely wrecked, is the singer-songwriter Stephen Bishop, known for the hit songs On and It Might Be You, the latter from the 1982 film Tootsie. What makes his appearance especially notable is that Bishop had also appeared in Animal House 2 years earlier, also directed by John Landis, as the guitar-playing student sitting on the staircase whose instrument, John Belushi, famously smashed against the wall in one of that film's most memorable scenes. The same man who had his guitar destroyed by Belushi in one film was now crashing a police car while chasing Belushi in the next. Bishop was a genuine friend of Landis and a recurring presence in his films. And if you've seen both Animal House and The Blues Brothers, the quiet continuity between his two appearances is a small reward for paying attention across the director's work. Detail 14. Elwood's driver's license hides Aykroyd's real birthday. When Elwood shows his Illinois driver's license, the address listed is 1060 West Addison Street, the actual address of Wrigley Field in Chicago, which briefly appears on screen earlier in the film when the Nazis attempt to find the brothers using the same address. But look more closely at Elwood's license number itself. It is an almost valid encoded Illinois number with Dan Aykroyd's actual birth date, July 1st, 1952, embedded in the sequence. It's a detail so small that it required pausing on a printed frame to catch it. Detail 13. The Dixie Square Mall was already abandoned. The wild car chase through the shopping mall, one of the most memorable sequences in the film, was filmed in the real Dixie Square Mall in Harvey, Illinois, which had already been closed and abandoned for approximately 2 years before filming began due to crime and economic decline in the surrounding area. The production filled the empty storefronts with actual merchandise borrowed from retailers, with the agreement that anything undamaged would be returned. The parking lot, completely empty, was filled with brand new cars borrowed from local dealerships purely to make it look like a functioning mall. Electrician Mark Hogan, who worked on the production, later recalled that longtime Chicago locals were astonished by what the city was permitting to be done. After production wrapped, the mall was never repaired or reopened. It continued to deteriorate and sit largely untouched for decades, a strange monument to one afternoon of filmed chaos, and was finally demolished in 2012. Detail 12. 103 cars were destroyed, a world record. The film set a Guinness World Record by destroying 103 cars during production. The record had been established deliberately, with the crew purchasing approximately 60 old police cars for around $400 each, and additional vehicles sourced or borrowed for other sequences. The massive pileup at the film's climax was staged over a specially dug trench so that vehicles would flip when they struck it. 40 professional stunt drivers were flown in each weekend to handle the most demanding chase work. Filming on Lake Street in Chicago included cars traveling at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, speeds the city had granted permits for. After one take, director John Landis decided the footage looked like it had been sped up in editing, so he arranged for stunt pedestrians to walk along the sidewalks during the next run, purely to provide a visual reference point for how fast the cars were genuinely moving. The world record stood for 2 years until a 1982 film called The Junkman wrecked 150 cars and a plane. The Blues Brothers record was eventually surpassed by The Matrix Reloaded in 2003, which demolished over 300 vehicles.
First came in, the bar lady never charged us for the first round, so, we figured, beer.
Detail 11. Aykroyd did his own driving. Dan Aykroyd performed most of his own driving stunts throughout production, including behind the wheel during many of the high-speed chase sequences. The famous bridge jump, where the Bluesmobile goes airborne over the raised East 95th Street Bridge over the Calumet River in Chicago, used a real drawbridge and a genuine ramp launch. The front axle cracked on landing. There was no backup shot planned. Production got it done and moved on. Detail 10. The budget doubled during production. The film's original budget was set at approximately $12 million. By the time production wrapped, costs had ballooned to an estimated $27.5 million. The overrun was driven by several factors at once. The sheer scale of the car chase sequences, which required cars, stunt drivers, permits, and repeated takes. The extended location shooting across Chicago over many weeks, and significant delays tied to Belushi's unpredictable behavior on set, which made scheduling nearly impossible on some shooting days. Universal Studios chairman Lew Wasserman was furious throughout production and was in regular conflict with Ned Tannen, the production executive overseeing the film. One studio executive flew to Chicago to assess the situation and was alarmed to find that the production had set up an entire dedicated facility just to house and maintain the 70 cars being used in the chase sequences. The movie still opened strongly on June 20th, 1980, and eventually earned more than $115 million worldwide, making it one of the most profitable films of the year and vindicating a production that had looked, at several points, like it might collapse entirely under its own weight. Detail 9. The Blues Brothers band members were real musicians. The band members backing Jake and Elwood throughout the film were not actors playing musicians. They were actual working musicians playing themselves, or versions of themselves, under different character names. Steve Cropper and Donald Duck Dunn, two of the most respected rhythm and blues musicians alive, both formerly of Booker T and the MGs and veterans of countless Landmark Stax record sessions in Memphis, appear in the band. Matt Murphy, another band member, was a genuine Chicago blues guitarist. Tom Bones Malone and Lou Marini were seasoned horn players. The other members were equally credentialed jazz, soul, and R&B players who had spent careers recording and touring at the highest levels. When the Blues Brothers performed live on Saturday Night Live before the film was made, they used the same musicians. For the concert scenes in the film, they were playing live, which is why those sequences have an energy that no amount of post-production mixing could have manufactured.
Caterers in the state. To obtain the 7 limousines for the wedding party, my father used up his last favors with mad.
Detail 8. Carrie Fisher was Aykroyd's real-life fiancée. Carrie Fisher played the unnamed mystery woman, Jake's former fiancée, who spends most of the film trying to kill him with increasingly large weapons, including a flamethrower, a rocket launcher, and enough high explosives to level an entire building. In real life, at the time of filming, Fisher was engaged to Dan Aykroyd. According to Aykroyd, Fisher had started choking during a dinner on set. He performed the Heimlich maneuver, saved her life, and then proposed to her on the spot. They were briefly engaged before Fisher reconciled with singer Paul Simon. Aykroyd wrote a tribute to Fisher after her death in December 2016, in which he described giving her a sapphire ring and said he had seriously contemplated their future together. The relationship between the film's two leads and the woman attempting to destroy one of them with military-grade weapons was, in other words, considerably more personal than it appeared on screen.
I ran out of gas. I had a flat tire. I didn't have enough money for gas.
Detail 7. Belushi was called the Black Hole on set. John Belushi earned an informal nickname during production, the Black Hole. The reason was specific and practical. He went through hundreds of pairs of identical Ray-Ban Wayfarer sunglasses during the shoot, because he would complete a scene, set the glasses down somewhere, and they would vanish. The production had to keep a constant supply on hand. The nickname stuck because things, sunglasses, props, food, sometimes Belushi himself, had a way of disappearing whenever he was around.
Gotta make that move towards redemption. We gotta go to church.
Gotta make that move toward redemption. You gotta go to church.
Detail 6. Belushi vanished one night and was found on a stranger's couch. During one of the nighttime location shoots, Belushi disappeared entirely from the set. Aykroyd went looking for him and eventually spotted a single house in the neighborhood with its lights still on. He walked up, fully prepared to explain who he was, what movie they were making, and why he was knocking on a stranger's door in the middle of the night. Before he could say a word, the homeowner opened the door, smiled, and said, "You're here for John Belushi, aren't you?" Belushi had walked into the stranger's house, asked if he could have a glass of milk and a sandwich, and fallen asleep on the couch. The homeowner had simply let him stay and gone back to whatever he was doing. Aykroyd started calling him America's Guest after that. It wasn't the only incident of this kind during production, but it was the one that best captured the particular quality of chaos Belushi brought to every location he occupied. Detail 5. The band's casual outfits hide a specific detail. Look carefully at how Jake and Elwood are dressed throughout the film, and a small but deliberate difference becomes apparent. Elwood consistently wears his white shirt with the sleeves rolled up past his elbows, and he always wears white socks. Jake keeps his sleeves down, and they often extend several inches past the cuff of his jacket. It's a consistent costuming choice maintained throughout the entire film that it quietly marks them as distinct personalities. Elwood slightly more casual and loose, Jake always slightly more buttoned up, even though they wear essentially the same outfit.
The band's room service tab from that Kiwanis gig in Coal City.
You did? That's right. So I don't want to hear any.
Detail 4. The original cut was 160 minutes long. The version of the Blues Brothers that played in theaters in 1980 ran approximately 133 minutes. But John Landis's original assembled cut was close to 160 minutes. Significant material was edited out before release, including extended scenes at Bob's Country Bunker, additional interactions between Jake and Elwood in the early part of the film, scenes of police investigating Elwood's apartment, and extended material from the final car chase involving the Illinois Nazis. A director's cut restoring much of this footage was eventually released. One scene in the director's cut explains something that puzzled many viewers of the theatrical cut: the reason Elwood randomly has a tube of powerful glue, which he uses to stick the accelerator to the floor of the bus. In the cut material, he had been working at a glue factory.
Hey, it's me, Joliet Jake. I once rented some column speakers from you for my band.
Detail 3. Ray Charles had a real music store in the film. Ray Charles plays Rayburn, the owner of a music store where Jake and Elwood try to purchase instruments and equipment for the band. During the scene, as the brothers are attempting to reason with him, a group of children in the store begin playing instruments, and Charles breaks into song, and the whole sequence becomes a full musical number. Charles performed all of his music live on set during filming. His sightlessness was incorporated naturally into the character without being called attention to in the script. The character's easy authority over the store and the children made the scene feel entirely genuine.
Now you're not going back on the road no more, and you ain't playing in them old two-bit sleazy dives. You're living with me now.
Detail 2. One of Aretha Franklin's backup singers was her real sister. In the scene where Aretha Franklin performs as Mrs. Murphy, the owner of the Soul Food Cafe, she is backed by a group of backup singers. If you look closely at the thinnest of the backup singers, the woman in blue shorts, that is Carolyn Franklin, Aretha's real younger sister. Carolyn Franklin was a gifted singer and songwriter in her own right, having written songs recorded by Aretha, as well as recording solo material of her own. She was not credited separately in the film's main titles, and the connection goes entirely unacknowledged on screen. It's one of those details that only surfaces if you happen to know what Carolyn Franklin looked like, or if someone who grew up watching the family perform points it out to you. The same detail also applies to the corresponding scene in Blues Brothers 2000, the 1998 sequel. Aretha reprised her role, and the same family dynamic was quietly maintained in the background.
55. We're in a truck.
Detail 1. The film was the first to earn more overseas than in the US. When the Blues Brothers finished its worldwide theatrical run, it had earned more than $115 million. Director John Landis later noted that it was, at the time, the first American film to gross more money outside the United States than within it. The film connected internationally in ways that genuinely surprised the studio, particularly in Europe, where Chicago blues, soul music, and the specific rhythm and blues tradition the film celebrated had a large and devoted following that predated the movie by decades. In Melbourne, Australia, the film developed a following comparable to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, screening regularly on Friday nights throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s at a local cinema called the Valhalla, with costumed audiences numbering in the hundreds and live performers reenacting scenes as the movie played on screen. What Universal had treated as a risky bet eventually became one of the more unlikely cult phenomena in film history. The Blues Brothers is one of those rare films where every single viewing still finds something new. The cameos pile up, the background details accumulate, and the sheer number of people involved, from Spielberg to Walsh to Frank Oz, makes it feel less like a movie and more like a reunion of an entire era. If you caught a few of these details before today, you were paying close attention. If not, now you know where to look next time. Go ahead and leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and if you want more videos like it, subscribe and stick around. There's a lot more worth looking at closely.